Go back into South Bend's history. 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? And what do you see? You see groups of people working to bring change to this city. They had different ideas of what that change should be. They didn't always agree. Yet, in every decade, there were groups of people for whom positive change was their life's work. This podcast, South Bend's Own Words, features the voices of people who helped make the city change. We'll share clips from the oral histories done by the Indiana University South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center that tell a more complete history of the city. It's the story of many cultures, not just one. It's the story of South Bend. In the 1920s, Lucille Sneed's parents left Tennessee to come to South Bend to work at Studebaker. They were part of the first wave of African Americans migrating north, chasing what they saw as opportunities in factory jobs. During World War II, Lucille's brother, who also worked at Studebaker, was called into military service. Lucille took his place at the factory. She still worked there after her brother returned. Lucille learned how to sew with large industrial machines to make upholstery and other fabric materials for thousands of Studebaker cars. She also learned how to navigate segregation in South Bend's shops, theaters, and restaurants. In 2002, Civil Rights Heritage Center co-founder Amy Selner and historian David Healey sat down with Ms. Sneed. They talked about her work at Studebaker, her time at Central High School, and what South Bend was like in the middle of the 20th century.
Okay, in 1943 you said you started at Studebaker.
Yes, June 22nd, 1943.
What did you do there actually? What were you hired into?
At that particular time, the aviation plant was in, we were working there, and I was hired in as an inspector.
And when you say aviation plant, for me not knowing what you're talking about, aviation plant is in...
Inspection was small parts of the airplanes during the wartime era, and we inspected small parts. Very beautiful, with gold and silver, very flashy, very good looking, very enjoyable work.
And you were hired in at 43. What happened wartime, once war was over?
After the wartime, we were still there. They were started with the cars. There were various jobs. I particularly think of the sewing. They called it the sewing room. This is where there were ladies, approximately I'd say 200 women. And there were none women of color there. And at that particular time, I did know how to sew on an electric sewing machine, a Singer sewing machine. My mother taught me how to sew. However, they were using the big power machines, and they were frightening to look at. But the supervisor that we had, a very lovely lady, very efficient. Her efficiency was like, say, maybe 115% or better. And therefore, she's very demanding of those who work for her. Well respected, but however, going into this department, and they had not had any, say, people of color there before, and these were persons of mostly Hungarian and Polish and people from the West End, and as I say again, seeing a person of color, this was something strange to think. However, I was able to stay there after many tears were shed, because this lady was the type of person who your efficiency, if it wasn't up to par, she would snatch your material, or if you didn't put the bobbin in right, you can't sew. We learned how to sew on these power sewing machines, and we learned that it was important to have productivity as well as efficiency. We really learned how to master these machines.
Was this lady also of color?
No, she was not. This other lady that worked with me? Yes, she was.
She was. So you had two African-American ladies in this sewing.
African-American ladies.
And only two out of...
Only two. We could tell we were not liked too well, but having her with me, we bonded together.
Were there any incidents? I mean, they just left, and this is so awkward. I mean, they just left you alone. I mean, they just...
Well, there were some few that were nice to us, shall we say, and they showed us how we could do our operations and whatnot. But the most of them went on their merry way, and some little catty things were said, which we just kind of ignored that. But one particular day, this one lady said, "Oh, we have 2 colored girls working with us, and and they don't smell either." It was kind of cute, but however, you learn how to live with that too. We were fortunate enough to stay until the last cars went off the line. So we feel as though there were ups and downs at Studebaker's. However, it was a blessing. And when Studebaker was leaving and when they left, there were many tears shed from them. They cried much because they said, "What are we going to do now? What about our homes? What about our children in school?" To find out that not only were there blacks with lack of education, there were many other persons who did not have education to carry on. And some of them, I think, committed suicide, which is very, very sad, because they loved Studebaker. This is all that they knew.
Where did your parents come from?
Tennessee into South Bend. At one time, 1920, I think they said, Studebaker's was hiring persons, and they invited people from other cities and whatnot to come. So this is how my mother came earlier, and then my father came on to start working here, as many other persons.
So your father worked at Studebaker?
Yes.
And do you think that's how you got into Studebaker, as one of the people that were
Not
hired?
because of my father, but because my brother went into the service. My brother had worked there prior to myself.
So your brother
a
had
few
too?
months. He had worked there also. Maybe it might have been a year before.
When you went to work in 1943, was that because of the defense contracts?
Yes, it was. During the defense, my brother had gone into service, and we were the oldest at home. There were 2 other children at home and my mom. And this was the first opportunity that we had to live a better life. We were living there on Western Avenue at the time, an old, dilapidated home without good plumbing, the necessary things that you need to live well. And there just was not money to do any better. And after I was able to work there, when brother came home from service, he came back there again. And we worked and helped my mother to get a little better house, and live better, live comfortably, and to have better food.
In 43, when you started, were there other blacks that got defense contract jobs at that time too?
Yes, this is when the multitude of people came in, particularly the women came in at that time to work. I think they'd always had men, but there were more men and women, because before Studebaker's, there were not many jobs here that young people didn't have money to continue on in school. Many of them left, say, high school in 10th and 11th grade because they needed to work. Instead of just say, hang in there, some of them were discouraged and they left and got jobs. And the jobs that were out there at that particular time were jobs like maybe, say, maid jobs, or the men were janitorial jobs, or an elevator job was
The job.
the job, elevator job, yes. Many of them young men, they shined the shoes, and there were just not any. And they worked in hotels around here, the waiters and whatnot. And this is the way they earned their living.
As far as schooling goes, where did you go to school at?
Well, I went to Central, and I graduated from Central in 1940. That was about it, with the exception of maybe, say, a class at IU, or a small leadership class that I had there, and another little class at Ivy Tech. So I can at least say I had my head in the door of both of them.
Did the counselors at Central give you any encouragement?
Not me, because the counselors said the same thing. I felt that they didn't have the right attitude, because they said, after all, there's no need to prepare for college, because after all, you're not college material, or you're not going to go, and so that was just about it.
Were there areas that, being a young black person, that you you just didn't go, you wouldn't go to? Did you feel that you were restricted from certain areas of South Bend?
Well, there were places that we were able to eat at Kresge's. They had a little counter there where you could maybe, if you could afford it, maybe get a hamburger or something like that. But to sit down to go into the restaurant, that was not thought of, and you just couldn't bother about it, you know. And of course, people didn't go out to eat much at that time anyway. There was no money to eat out.
Did you ever go to the natatorium to swim?
Yes, you could stick your feet in the water. We could go there, and there was one day a week that we were allowed to go there. And those that could not swim, we put our feet in the water and kind of wade around a little bit, you know.
I have, other people have told me that, women have told me that it was difficult downtown, some of the dress shops, that black women were not encouraged to buy anything at these shops.
Yes. The time that I bought there, I was able to buy what I wanted, but there was an estrangement there. You could tell that, you know, in particular. And then another thing that happened around South Bend, the hue of your skin, the color of your skin made a difference. If you were the fairer lot, you know, you were offered the better jobs, you know.
What about theaters?
Well, the theaters, there was a little theater down the street, the Strand, I believe, and you know, you'd go there and you just automatically went upstairs to sit because that's where you're supposed to sit.
And I guess my question is, what? And you've used this term before. You know, you automatically have done this. Did your parents actually tell you? Were there signs? Was someone there to remind you? Why automatically?
I guess blacks took it for granted that things were. Well, my mother used to always say things are going to get better, you know, or something of that nature.
South Bend's Own Words was created by Kevin Tidmarsh and me, George Garner. This episode was produced by Donald Britton from the Ernestine M. Racklin School of the Arts at IU South Bend, and by me through the Civil Rights Heritage Center. Visit us and learn how IU South Bend students inspired the transformation of a once segregated South Bend swimming pool. We give guided tours and offer public events that show how the history of oppression echoes through the city today. See and hear more history, plan your visit, or share your thoughts about this episode, all at crhc.iusb.edu.